Alright, so here's the face-on view, and this is going to show you pretty much what it is you're doing, and then what I'll take you through is sort of what's the result of what it is that you're doing in your swing. And what I've done is I've marked your hips here with these red lines and marked your head. And so what you'll see is that as you move the club away, you really make a pretty nice move here to the point where the shaft's parallel to the ground. Head stays pretty centered, right hip's turning back behind you, looks pretty good. And then the problem you run into is right when you get to this point, what you'll see is that right hip really starts to move outside the line. So as that right hip is moving to the right, or to your right, to the left on this video, but as the right hip moves away from the target, what it does is once that hip starts getting outside this line, and the weight, you can see the weight starting to get on the outside of your foot over here, and the inside of your foot, your spikes are actually coming up off the ground a little bit. You're kind of rolling onto the outside of that foot. And so when the hip starts to get outside, what that does is the hands can't move inward anymore once that hip stops turning back. So once the hip stops turning back, and especially once it slides, you really have to just kind of pick up the arms. And you can see here as I kind of click to the top, you're just going to lift the arms up in the air because you can't turn anymore. The arms can't go in, they can only go up. And so now that you're in this position, you'll see years of playing good golf and being a good player, you're going to really load the shaft hard here. You're going to see nice downstroke move. You're going to see nice angle between the shaft right here and the lead arm. This is outstanding. The problem is when we see the down the line view is that this club is on an extremely steep angle coming down. And the reason it's on a steep angle is what you're doing with your hips. Because you slid them away from the target, you now have you did a little bit of a hip drive towards the targets where you got your hip back to where it started. But you'll see that tour players and guys that hit it a long way, their hip is probably out in this position at this point in the downswing. And that hip move allows you to shallow the shaft out. So what you'll see happens is that you've got this club loaded hard. It's extremely steep coming down, and you know as a good player that if you don't make some compensation, you're in trouble, because that shaft is you're going to basically stick the driver into the ground and hit right down on top of the ball and pop it up, hit a disaster shot. So you'll notice that you'll start loading the shaft. The shaft's really getting steep, and so now to fix it, watch your head start falling to the right, and that move shallows the shaft enough, and you can see really the head's really fallen to the right in the downswing. The head's now in this position from where it started. So your head's dropped and fallen back, and that's due to the way the hips have moved, because you can see the hips now are still on their original starting line. There was virtually no hip slide past where you started. And as you move into this position, you can see the hips are actually starting to pull away from where they were at address. Still not going forward. You now have a little bit of a gap right here where the hips started, and you've actually pulled them back a little bit. And that can cause a lot of issues in the swing. And here I'll show you the down the line view. And with this down the line view, it'll really show real clearly what it is that this move is causing you to do. So so from this position, we can see that you will start the club back. Club actually goes back again in a nice position here. This really looks pretty good. I mean, that's nicely going back on the inside. Shaft looks good. Shaft starts to come up, and we can measure here now where your left arm's parallel to the ground. I'm going to put a line in here. I guess I'll use blue. It's probably easier to see up in the sky. But you got the blue line here where the shaft's pointing. Just inside the ball, not bad. Ideally, it's a little closer to the pointing at the ball, but I don't mind this position in the backswing a little bit. And we can put a circle around your hands to show where your hands are at this point in the backswing. So here's your hands. So now what happens is, because of that right hip slide, your hands can't go in anymore. They now can only go up because you've slid that right hip away from the target. So now there they go. They start going up, up, up. Now you can see the hands have not gone inward anymore. They're basically the same distance back. They've only gone up. From this circle, they've only moved up into this circle. And now you'll see them, because you can't slide forward enough. Ideally, this left hip, you're sliding your hip a lot to the target, and what that will do will shallow the shaft. But because you slid them away from the target, now what's going to happen is your left hip's going to pull away, and your right hip's going to go forward, and now you're in trouble. Now you're in a position where if we go back and put circles on your hands, so here's where your hands are now. So they went in nicely into this circle, straight up into this one, and now they've come over into this position. And so now if we measure the shaft at this point, you've gone from blue, which is just inside the ball, to now much steeper with the red. And you're basically, if you didn't make a serious compensation, you'd slam this driver right into the ground somewhere about here, just about a foot behind the ball. But you're not going to do that. You're a good player, and so in the next couple of frames, your head is going to dive back towards the camera, and now you've made enough of an adjustment with the club shaft. Now you've got the shaft pointed out in here, and you made enough compensation to shallow it out to where you can actually put the driver on the ball. With that head falling back, lots of hand release over in here, etc. So the fix is all in the hips. If you can fix the hips, you'll stop the hands from making this move where they go from in this circle here, they go up to this circle, and then they come over. That's where your trouble comes from. Ideally, if we can get them to go from this circle and then just continue on that path to where they're still moving back and in instead of straight up, and then with a little bit of hip slide, your hands would fall back into the same circle, not over, and then you can go ahead and hit it with a little bit more power and a little more consistency. So that's kind of the visual. And I'll put a video up here with some tips to make the fix.